Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade. Well guys, in this one we're going to be talking about predictions. Yes, predictions about what season 3 dungeons we're going to see for Mythic Plus, you know. So as you know, we already have used all the dungeons from the Dragonflight seasons, and Blizzard likes to do these things after we use the dungeons of a season, use dungeons from older seasons, and then use like the mega dungeon that they put and divide it in two and use that. So currently, we have two dungeons that are going to be guaranteed being in the next season of Mythic Plus. Those being the two parts of the new Mega Dungeon, which is Dawn of the Infinite. You know, so the first half is going to be Chronic Card, Manifest the Time Waste, Blight of Glycron, and it's going to end on Iridic Crown, the Stone Scaled. And the second part is going to be Tyr, Morchi, Time Lost Battlefield, and Chronolord Deus. So this is actually a dungeon that I'm looking forward to because a lot of these bosses are pretty fun, but there are some that are going to be a problem maybe in Mythic Plus situations, but there's always people that are going to come with weak auras for them. For one example here is Morchi. For example, Morchi fight is a bit annoying because she spawns a bunch of copies of herself and you gotta like find the real Morchi or you die. In a Mythic Plus setting, you will probably have to always find a copy because you're going to die eventually on, let's say, a 20 key. Yeah, it's going to probably one shot or something like that. So that fight is going to be kind of annoying, but I know people will find a weak aura or something like that. For other fights, I don't really think there's problematic fights. Maybe Chronic Arc is going to be a bit weird to adapt at the first. You know, you gotta move from the big circle and then soak the little circle and all those things. But people are probably going to adapt. As from loot from this place on the next season, there's really good stuff that you can actually get. This Accelerating Sandglass sounds pretty good as a passive trinket. You know, it gives a lot of haste. I also said that Crusading Strikes build is going to probably be the way to go as for next season because it scales really well with all of the stats, you know, while Templar Strikes doesn't scale really well with crit or haste. So this is an actual good trinket that we can get from next season, you know. Other stuff from these first bosses not very important. From the next 4 bosses, there are really good stuff. For example, Mirror of Fracture Tomorrow. So this trinket is really strong. But the thing is a 3-minute cooldown trinket. You know how I feel about those. They're pretty wonky to use. And then you have to like pick the scenarios where you want to use it because that's a lot of power you get every 3 minutes, but then you don't have it like for the rest of the cooldown, you know. So while it's a really good trinket, it might be a bit funky to use. But still, this dungeon is really good. If we have a dungeon that has demons, you know, you can get this Gorhal Might of the Warship. This thing might be like Ashkandur is now for humanoids, this thing for demons. So, you know, probably they're going to be using some dungeons from Legion for next season. So this might actually have some value if there's some like good demons out there to kill. Because Demon Bane gives you a chance to proc a dot on the target that you hit. It has to be a demon, you know, so it's pretty good weapon for those scenarios. All in all, these two dungeons I think are going to be really good next season, and since we know they are going to be guaranteed there, it's good to look at the loot, you know. Now let's go to my predictions of all dungeons that are going to be there. Okay guys, so for my predictions, as we can see, this current season has 4 Mythic Plus dungeons from Dragonflight, but next season there's only going to be 2. So I'm thinking they're going to be doing 2 dungeons from BFA, 2 dungeons from Legion, 1 dungeon from WoD, and 1 dungeon from Pandaria. So let's talk about the 2 dungeons from Legion first that they're going to probably bring. So from all the list of Legion dungeons, there's only 4 that they haven't actually bring. You know, they haven't brought back Cathedral of the Eternal Night, Seed of the Triumvirate, Maw of Souls, and Archwave. From these dungeons, we can discard Maw of Souls because Blizzard said they don't want dungeons to be so short as Maw of Souls is. You know, this dungeon is the shortest Mythic Plus dungeon that ever existed. You could do it in like 9 minutes, even less than that if you had like an optimized group, just doing a huge pull and just nuking everything down. So I'm really not expecting Maw of Souls to appear in the next season's Mythic Plus. From the next 3, Cathedral of the Eternal Night, Seed of the Triumvirate, and Archwave. Archwave is the one that I'm going to discard because, well, it's a really damn long dungeon. This thing was, I think, 44 minutes long in Legion, and I don't think it's possible to make it go down onto a 30-minute dungeon. You had to like nerf a bunch of the things in there and like remove maybe some trash back. And still, this thing has like, it has 5 bosses, it has a lot of trash, so this place is probably not going to be in the next Mythic Box rotation, you know. But that leaves us with 2 dungeons that I think will be there. First one is the Cathedral of the Eternal Night. This place in Legion was a nightmare, but I think people are already ready for this dungeon now, you know. In Legion it was a very dangerous dungeon. It had a lot of like, I don't know, hard mechanics. I guess it's because the thing was introduced so late in the expansion, but people had a really hard time dealing with this place. But I'm thinking this is going to be one of the Legion dungeons that are going to be next season. In loot, in terms of loot, there isn't really anything really good for red paladins that we can get from this. Yes, there is this trinket that's a 1 in a 20-second cooldown trinket. That's really weird. It gives you main stat and then it's a haste trinket. So not really good trinket, you know. Other than that, it has your normal stuff, you know, like weapon gear, like main stat gear and all those things, cloaks, rings and all those things. But trinkets is the most important thing we're going to be looking in those dungeons. And this trinket, I don't think is going to be really good. 1 minute and 20-second trinket, really weird cooldown. So I'm not thinking this is going to be very valuable, but the dungeon itself is pretty fun, you know. Okay, next one, and I think this is going to be Seat of the Triumvirate. So Seat of the Triumvirate was one of those dungeons that was ahead of its time, I think. The mechanics of this place were something like you could find in modern dungeons. It was really hard. It came like late in the Legion expansion, similar to Cathedral of the Eternal Night. Everyone kind of like knew this place was really hard, and I gotta be honest with you guys, I played Legion, but I didn't like to do this place. It was just really damn hard for whatever reason for its time, you know, and I still don't know what the hell happens in both fights. Anyways, I do remember some stuff, you know, so let's talk about the bosses. The Zural the Ascended, I remember this fight had like limited time. You had to kill the boss until, if you didn't, the boss killed you, and that was pretty much the end of your key. After that, we got Zaprish. This guy had like pets, and you had to micromanage a lot of things because one of the pets needed kicks, the other one put swirlies on the ground. You also had to tank the boss and all those things. So it has a bunch of micromanaging things that like you would find in current like dungeon boss fights. So yeah, it was pretty hard. Next one was Viceroy Nisrar. So this one I remember clearly. This guy had a really big shield that you had to break by killing some ads. If you didn't break the shield, well, you got feared and then you died. You also had limited time to kill this boss because it like made the arena smaller and smaller every time, because there was like a shadow area that you got. If you weren't into there, you took damage and then eventually you just died. So you either died because of the fear, either died because the area was just small and you couldn't kill the boss in time, or you died because you couldn't kill the ads to break the shield. So there was a lot of things you could die on this boss. It was really rough for its time. In the last boss, Lura, this was the boss that every healer hated because this guy just did pulsing damage all the fight, you know, and the fight went too long. The damage was also high, you know, and everyone died. So yeah, this boss not only had that healer check, it also had, you had to kill ads, you had to kill big ads, you had to kill small ads, and then kill the boss and move away from swirlies that were really fast. So if you got stuck in one, you just died. So yeah, it was a really tough fight for its time. Okay, so as for loot in Seat of the Triumvirate, there's really nothing to notice that much, especially there's only one thing, you know, trinkets are the things that we like to talk about, and this Void Start contract, it might not look really good, you know. For this time it wasn't really good. It was actually a trash trinket in Legion because we did scale a lot with mastery and haste back then, and this thing just did damage on a 1.5 minute cooldown, you know, and that wasn't good enough because since we didn't have much burst or crit or anything like that back then, this thing didn't do much, you know. It wasn't an incredible trinket. Just if you could get it, nice, but wasn't nothing really powerful, you know. But now a lot of these trinkets that just do damage, for example Beacon from the Beyond, things like that, are actually pretty valuable for us because we do scale pretty well with burst. Burst makes trinkets do more damage, and also they get the benefit of crit from our wings. So yeah, this thing could actually be pretty good in future scenarios. I'm not discarding it as a garbage trinket, but it might be good if this dungeon like comes around next season. Okay, now let's talk about the BFA dungeons that I think that are going to come. Okay guys, now let's talk about the BFA dungeons that I have in my predictions, and two of them are pretty fun dungeons in my opinion. King's Rest and Waycrest Manor. I think those are the two dungeons that they're going to bring back from the BFA expansion. Both dungeons are pretty modern in terms of mechanics. They had a lot of things that people had to like take care of. There's a lot of kicks, a lot of spot healing that healers have to do. Pretty modern dungeons in my opinion, and I think they could just fit in with a season and current Dragonflight, you know. Let's talk first about King's Rest, you know, because this one is the one that we are really interested in loot as Retribution Paladins, because it has a really special weapon. King's Rest was Nightmare and Tyrannical, and it was kind of easy on Fortified with the exception of one thing, you know. In Fortified, you only had to worry about the Shadow of Zul. This was just one mob that was before the last boss. This mob hurt a lot, and it did a bunch of group damage. And if you couldn't kill it, well, your run just died there. And you normally save all cooldowns lost to kill this thing before the boss on Fortified Keys. You could resort to just like spawn rezzing on one place if you just died a lot. You could drag this thing to a rest point and just kill it eventually, you know. But still, yeah, this was pretty hard on Fortified just because of that lonely mob. On Tyrannical, most of these bosses had a bunch of like heavy burst damage on one target. The Cloud Serpent had its golden spit, you know, spit gold just did a bunch of damage, and a dot on a person. Healer had to take care of that. Other than that, just dodge the tornadoes. It spawned like similar to storming tornadoes, so just dodge them and don't get hit because they just kill you. They leave a nasty dot. Machimba was also a really hard spot healing fight. He targeted people with like laser stuff, and you just had to heal it up, you know, or use heavy defensives. Then you had the entomb mechanic where it puts someone in a coffin. You gotta guess the coffin that the person was there. Well, not guess, you know, like communicate. I'm in this coffin and just break them out of there. Kind of like a gimmicky mechanic, but other than that, like just had a bunch of health and a bunch of damage that you had to do on the boss. I remember it was really rough on tanks, especially. This guy like hit really hard. The next one was Council of Tribes. Council of Tribes, I remember, was a kind of a gimmick fight. You know, it's a three-part fight. You fight one of each of these bosses. You kill one, the next one comes in. Of these, the hard one I think was Kula the Butcher. She had this Severing Axe that put a really nasty dot on someone. It was a physical dot, so you could like bop it or just use heavy defensives to survive it. The other ones were kind of chill. There was not much to talk about them, but Kula the Butcher, I do remember, was a hard one that hit really hard on most like clothy classes, for example. Physical damage is just tough on them. And Dazar, you know, Dazar was a really, it could be considered similar to a raid fight. This guy had a lot of mechanics. He had different phases. He spawned a raptor that you had to kill. It was like a shield. You kill the raptor, he goes away. If you don't kill the raptor, you get feared. Dodge the gale flashes that were more like tornadoes, similar to storming. Yeah, I remember also this guy being really hard on tanks with that blade combo. If they didn't have any mitigation, they just died. So yeah, Dazar was pretty rough on Tyrannical as I remember it. Now let's talk about loot in this place. So for loot, well, King's Rest has something really good. I think in this era it would also be really good, and it was Getiku, you know, Cut of Death. Back then the sword was really decent on doing single target damage. It did nice priority damage because it left a really powerful bleed on your main target, you know, that you hit. Currently we scale, like I said, pretty decently well with versatility, so this thing could get a lot of benefit from that and get more damage done, you know. It's different times. Back then this thing wasn't actually used that much on Mythic Plus because, well, we did scale with Mastery, like I said. So Mastery doesn't actually increase the damage of Getiku, but it was a pretty decent like raid weapon for single target scenarios and priority damage, like I said. So I think in this thing could actually see some use in Tyrannical Keys in the current like setting of Dragonflight, like we are now, like the current Retribution Paladin. Okay, now let's go to the next dungeon that I have in my predictions, and this is Waycrest Manor. So I think Waycrest Manor is a pretty, I would say, modern dungeon because it has a lot of kicks, a lot of mechanics that people have to do. You gotta interrupt stuff. The only problem with this place that people had back then, it was just kind of claustrophobic. There was a lot of like affixes that had like area of denial that that were nightmares on the little hallways of Waycrest Manor. But it was a fun dungeon. You could do some really big pulls and do big AoE damage on this place. It has 5 bosses. But all of them are pretty intuitive, you know, pretty fun boss fights to do. They have some gimmicks and stuff. Most of them is just control kicks and all those things. Especially I want to talk one fight, and this is Raul the Glutinous, because there was a huge pull that you could do with Raul. I remember you could do the whole room pull and just bring them all to Raul and just nuke them down. Back then we had uncapped AoE damage, so I don't know if that's going to be possible now. Because you only had to control like 2 mobs in that pull. I think 2 guys did like a shout that you had to kick, and that was pretty much it, and then you could just pull everything to Raw. But like I said, we had uncapped AoE back then. We don't have that currently, so those pulls might not be like possible with certain compositions of groups. But still, this place was really fun. Like I said, not gonna talk about each individual boss, but trust me, most of them are really fun fights to do. On the loot part, this is something that could be useful. Gore Crested Butcher's Block back then wasn't an incredible trinket. It just gives you main stat strength, and it's a proc of critical strike. I think it was 2 procs per minute, so it was up pretty often. You know, if you're going with the Crusading Strikes build, this thing might be useful, you know, because that build likes to have some extra critical strike. So while not an incredible trinket, it's just a nice stat stick to have. Now let's go and talk of the really old dungeons that I think they're going to bring to next season. Okay, yeah, so Blizzard has to pick old dungeons, you know, so I'm thinking they're going to skip this time Cataclysm, and they're going to pick 2 dungeons, one from Mists of Pandaria and the other one from Warlords of Draenor, you know. So the Mist of Pandaria dungeon that I think they're going to pick is Scholomance. Yeah, Scholomance. Why? Because they recently revamped this place. You know, they made a quest line here to get back into Naxxramas. Maybe they put this dungeon in, and I'm all in for it. You know, these bosses are pretty good. I didn't do the dungeon, you know, I just one-shot everything when I was getting my stuff for Naxxramas, but I think this place has a pretty good vibe, you know. There's a bunch of AoE you can do. I think most of these bosses, when I did them also on time walking, are pretty okay-ish. You could bring them to current standard of bosses, you know, of mechanics and stuff. There's a bunch of trash. Everyone likes trash. Everyone wants to do big AoE and stuff. So I'm thinking this dungeon could actually be brought back, and also it has pretty sweet loot. Let's talk about that now. So there's 2-hander weapons, but what we want is trinkets, you know. We as paladins, we really want 2-minute trinkets, because they just line up with our cooldowns pretty nice, and it allows us to just bind it with our wings and just let it rip, you know, just kill stuff. So this thing, Lessons of the Dark Master, seems like a pretty decent trinket. It has haste, it's a 2-minute cooldown, it gives you a bunch of main stat. Pretty simple, but simple stuff does the job, you know. Just bind this to your wings and just use it every 2 minutes. It's gonna be great, you know. So yeah, I'm thinking Scholomance is going to be a good choice if they go for a dungeon from Mists of Pandaria. Now let's go to the choice of Warlords of Draenor. Okay guys, so from WoD, what dungeon would be good? We already seen some stuff from Warlords of Draenor. We've seen Grimroyal Depot and Iron Docks, and I thought people were trolling with those 2 dungeons because I didn't really enjoy any of them. Actually, Grimroyal Depot was pretty chill, you know. It was really easy to time because, well, it was really short, you know. Iron Docks I didn't like. There was too many like frontal stuff, and being melee, and if your tank just moved a little bit, you got smacked, you know. So I didn't really like Iron Docks. But the dungeon that I think is going to come back is Everbloom. I would really love them to bring Everbloom. It seems like a pretty decent Mythic Plus dungeon, you know. There's paths that you can take, there's trash that you can skip and do, and all those things, you know. And I did this thing on time walking, and I think it's a pretty good dungeon that they can bring back. The mechanics are pretty solid. I think it's nice, you know, and there's also pretty damn good loot, you know. There's really good trinkets that Red Paladins could use on these types of simple dungeons, you know. For example, this place also has a very simple trinket that we can use. It's just a stat stick. Paladins love stat sticks, you know, and this thing is actually pretty decent, for example, for the Crusading Strike build, you know. It just gives you main stat, and you have a chance to gain a bunch of haste, you know, just to hit more times with your Crusading Strikes. As I said, I believe that's going to be the build that is going to be eventually scaling up once we get more stats next season and all those things. So I think this could be a good trinket to get, you know. Maybe you maybe you use this thing on top of, if they bring back Scholomance, like I said before, you could use that thing that gives you haste on top of this that also gives you haste, and also it's a 2-minute cooldown with a bunch of strength. You know, one of these trinkets has main stat on the trinket itself and a haste proc, and the other one just has a haste on the trinket and a main stat proc, which makes it pretty balanced. You know, you don't want to use two trinkets that just have like secondary stat as the baseline. You want 1 and 1, you know. So I think those two trinkets, if they bring back, could be a good like a decent Mythic Plus trinket setup, you know, if they don't put like something overpowered in the raids. And well guys, that's going to be my Mythic Plus dungeon predictions for next season. I really hope they bring those dungeons back, you know. Most of them I really enjoyed, especially Waycrest and King's Rest. I really would love them to put them back into the game. I really enjoyed BFA, by the way. I'm a fan of like stuff from that expansion, like Business of Perfection. We also have the corruptions, you know, remember 250 plus mastery on Red Palace. Good times, you know. And well guys, that's going to be all for the video today. Let me know down in the comments, what dungeons do you want Blizzard to bring back for next season? You know, there's a lot of stuff to pick from, so just let me know down in the comments if there's something you like, and I'll try to respond to all the comments I can. You know, I always try to do that. And well guys, if you enjoy my my content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. Thanks for watching, everyone.